That's a Shame is brought to you by the people who support us over at patreon.com/shamecity.
If you have $1,
$2.
$1 to spare, join us again at patreon.com/shamecity. Please.
Look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities.
Hello and welcome to another free episode of That's a Shame. What some are calling before a huge change, before a great leap forward.
Is that what they're...
That's what
we're calling it internally on GLF?
That's what there's
I've not
buzzing
seen
around on
those
the
notes.
airwaves. A sort of penultimate show before a huge set of announcements.
Yeah, 200's going to be popping off.
It's going to be big.
We've got it perfectly planned out to the second.
Yep,
almost,
scripted.
Yep.
It's basically already recorded, but for the speaking of the words.
Yeah. Other than that, it's in the can.
Yeah.
Who are you, by the way?
Me, I'm Declan.
I'm Isaac.
Unless you didn't know, or in case you didn't know, it's what
Yes,
me.
true.
I was thinking it's been a long time, hasn't it? 199 episodes
and a half.
There's a couple of extras in there as well.
Yeah, strictly speaking, we're probably on episode about 400 if we include all of the bonuses. That
it's actually not special at all. That's what I've been thinking.
And all of the giving that we've done as well.
Think of it. Just take a moment to think of it. I'm sure you at home are thinking of it as well.
Yeah.
You probably don't know where to start.
Probably not.
But I was sort of looking back over our long and storied history. And whilst we are, a show that I'm sure you'll agree is grounded in the history. It's grounded in culture.
There's a reverence to the show that I think is lacking, dare I say, from this generation, this modern
they don't. No.
They don't have respect for the
here today,
stories.
Gone tomorrow kind of generation. The TikTok generation.
Generation me, I've heard them before.
Oh, yeah.
And that got us big time.
Yeah.
That's us.
And so in spite of us kind of being, the last bastion against that kind of super woke and fleeting generation, we're a show with surprisingly few real traditions. That
is true, yeah.
But we've had one that's kind of was running for a few years, but it unfortunately got stolen from us by COVID-19.
Oh, right.
And I don't know about you, but I was pretty torn up about it. And if for no other reason, then it was a good place to go for content that we no longer had. And whilst we can't quite return to it in the great kind of striking form that we might normally, I thought that actually maybe this is another area where you and I have been guilty of ignoring the history, of not doing the research.
I don't like the sound of
not
that.
doing the reading. And so what I've done to kind of make up a kind of last gasp attempt for us to do so is I've gone back and done something of a historical cross-section.
A deep dive.
Of our and the show's favourite, the Bad Sex in Fiction Awards throughout history.
Wow.
The award has been running since about 1993.
Okay.
Which is a lot longer than I had thought.
Life.
Nearly, and indeed longer than mine.
Yeah,
I'd like to just point that out.
I don't remember of the first one, I have to say. That passed me by.
That's okay. That's not your fault. You were probably busy dealing with like object permanence and stuff like that, which takes up
me
all
a couple
that time.
of weeks.
But the first one was actually Melvin Bragg.
Wow.
Of
Our Time show.
Yeah. But unfortunately, it's as you go further back, it's harder to find all of the extracts and articles that were written about it.
Probably many of them are now considered illegal.
I've been quite rightly struck from the internet.
And the literary record.
Yeah.
The British Museum just burns those shelves once every decade.
But thankfully, they have still managed to leave up, possibly by oversight, if nothing else, a real smorgasbord of truly despicable content.
Hot, though?
Oh, hot beyond belief.
I just wanted to check the temperature on that.
And is that a weather joke because it's been really hot?
No.
Is that
but
not?
if it works for you on that level, then
it does, because I'm sweating like a... Oh, goodness.
Enjoy.
Well, I won't say because probably just as bad as some of the stuff I'm about to read.
And so what's the format here?
Well, I've got...
Have you got favourites?
Years, I've got favourites.
Yep.
I thought I'd just kind of take
Have
you
you got
through.
categories?
I've not got categories. I've got a long list of extracts. One from sort of most years that it's been going. Not always the winner. Sometimes I think that they, it's not on me to criticise the literary review, but I think sometimes they've gone for the cliched choice rather than the standout winner.
So maybe what we're doing, if I could just try and elevate our content here.
Go on.
We are documenting the cultural landscape chronologically from each of those years that we look at, and seeing how the literary world has reflected, maybe even led the charge on the kind of sexual fervour that befalls the Anglosphere.
Yes, I didn't really listen to that.
This is an important act.
That is true. 100%. That bit is definitely true. Yeah. So do you want me to go chronologically then? Would that make the most sense for that? Cool.
Because then, like, the first ones in the 90s, it'll probably be like, I did Coke on an Oasis album hotly. And then by 2021, it'll be like, there'll be spaceships and shit.
Yeah. Because
I fucked some Bitcoin.
You couldn't write about spaceships in the 90s because they didn't know about them.
Yeah.
They did not know. Cool. We're going to go back to 1997.
Whoa!
And this is from a novel called Of Blessed Memory by Erica Jong or Yong.
Okay.
Now, like, obviously I've got a lot of the reading to do here today. Yeah. So what I do is just stop me if you have some thoughts.
Always felt free to do so.
Yeah, just make sure that you do. And sometimes if I think that you should have had a thought but you haven't interrupted, I'll just stop.
And I'll have to improvise.
You will. I'll be like, I'll just throwing over to Isaac. Yeah. He looks long and lovingly at my wet vagina, saying, "A flower, a jungle flower," as he caresses one lip and then the other, tweaks my clitoris with his tongue, and lifts his head to declaim rapturously, "Someday I will paint this jungle flower, this Venus man-trap. But first...
This man-trap's bad.
I will subdue it."
Oh, no.
And he plunges into me with his iron stalk, touching my womb again and again until I weep tears of joy.
I thought it was going to rhyme with again and correctly say pain.
He cannot stop until he has made me come 3 times.
Is that the rules?
That's it.
Is that a contractual obligation?
She's made him sign up first. And I'm quivering from my thighs to my toes, and I plead for a rest.
That's a very specific area.
Yeah, it's not as much as I might have thought.
That's the knee down.
And I plead for a rest, a breather, saying, "Come, come, my love." Maybe he took that as an instruction.
Oh, right.
That was where there was some confusion.
It's a communication issue.
Yeah.
You've got to work these things out in advance.
At last, he ejaculates, shuddering and growling, making the noises of a seal, baying at the Arctic moon. My slippery seal, I say. My salty sweetheart. My kingdom of the 3 slipperies.
Kingdom of the 3? Oh, each orgasm is now a slippery in this.
Maybe.
Unless she's talking about like the Holy Trinity, in which case the
triumvirate
church is going to have some real issues. That's really awfully foul. I mean, it started in a really cliche way, but then it became very off-piste.
Yeah, really. What I do wonder when kind of people,
what was going on in
especially are writing about. Well, this was probably sort of celebratory after the election of Tony Blair.
Right, yeah.
Is that Diana?
I think Diana died in 97. That's what it was about. No. That's what she probably
What happened on my birthday in 97? A Delta II rocket carrying a military GPS payload explodes.
Remember?
God, yeah, no. In fact, we had to cancel my party.
Yeah. Because of the Cape Canaverals.
When people are writing about sex and they decide incorrectly that it's appropriate to do a simile, because there are none. There are no similes that should be used for sex.
It was like fucking a robot.
But one made of flesh.
A flesh bod.
But why choose... At last he ejaculates, shuddering and growling, making the noises of a seal baying at the Arctic.
Let me stop you right there.
Go on.
It's super hot.
Oh.
They're one of the horniest animals out there.
The seal.
Considering that they are quite literally without horn.
Yeah, they are
Or
sans
tusk,
horn.
as compared to their brother walrus.
The walrus or the narwhal.
But no, the seal is a kind of blubbery, quivering mass of. Well, it's a hot mess.
It's a hot mass.
Aquatic mass. And that's how we all. That's. I'm surprised you don't know that. I thought it was going in a different direction because at the very start, like Act 1 was just like cliche kind of gross.
A flower, a jungle flower.
But no, as soon as it got into jungle flower and then subduing, like that was an image of basically the gold of Cortez, the jewels of Pizarro,
Absolutely
like
Ratcliffing his way
down,
through.
Yeah. in some kind of like terrible
What's that,
Joseph Conrad thing.
Yeah, or that John Donne poem where he's like, my lover is America and I will conquer her, sort of thing.
Yes. That was like sort of horny colonialism, but then that sort of fell off to be replaced by the fuck seals, and that's where it kind of got away from
the
me.
Venus man trap.
Yeah, let's not bother with that.
That was I think they call that, it's like a play on words, something like that, which is quite good.
It's really bad.
The next is actually from a whole 7 years later.
2004.
It is, and it's from Gregory David Roberts, who wrote a novel called Shantaram.
Oh, okay. Shantaram, I know that name.
I don't. And I don't wish to be honest.
I don't think I know the book.
Having read this particular extract.
Talk me through it. Now, let me just contextualise it. This is the year that Facebook was founded.
Wow. So
that's probably what
that's going to come through here.
Well, it's because it was in the zeitgeist, like we were all thinking.
The sort of language that concludes this piece is quite Facebook-esque, if I may. So
there's going to be poking of some kind.
You feel that? She mumbled, her teeth clenched and exposed in a grim smile. That's muscle power, boy. That's what that is. That's training and practice. Hours of it. Months of it. Madame Jus makes a squat and squeeze down hard on a pencil to build up a grip like a fist. I got so fucking good at it, I could write a letter with the goddamn thing. What's the matter with you? Don't you want to fuck me? What are you? Some kind of
Wow. Is that it?
That's the end of the extract.
So
thankfully.
that's Game Awards.
That's Game Awards, yeah.
That's showing like the advent of when it started to be cool to post Game Awards online. And that's still going on today.
Yeah, no, people are still saying the F slur online.
Yeah.
And that, I suppose, is a testament to Gregory David Roberts' cultural impact.
That might be the first recorded use of it in fuck fiction. As far as I know.
I can't personally think of. I don't know enough to dispute that.
No. It sounds like something that could be true.
What did you think? May I just sort of like ask about the pencil imagery, the writing of a letter? I just because to make it clear to you and any other listeners, I'm pretty sure, having read between the lines, that she's holding the pencil in her vagina.
Yeah, I don't know if that's literally true.
Not
I think
in the
she
fist.
might be fronting. I don't know if that's literal or metaphorical, but to me, that neither of those paths really matter because they both converge on it's shit. It's bad.
Oh no, maybe that's why he chose it.
Perhaps, yeah.
2005's entry is actually from Marlon Brando, co-written with someone called Donald Camel.
Marlon Brando? I thought he was already dead by 2005. Okay.
Me too. The one thing that you need to know when we read this passage is that there's a character called Annie, but Annie is a man.
Okay.
It's actually that's his nickname.
Short for Anakin.
Anatole.
Okay, well, my one works too.
In a moment, Annie was on his side. Madame Lai was like a plant growing over him, and her little fist, brackets holding the biggest black pearl, was up his arsehole, planting the pearl in the most appreciated place. Oh, Lord, he cried out, I'm a-comin'.
What?
She could not answer. It is the one drawback of fellatio as conscientious as hers, that it eliminates the chance for small talk and poetry alike. But nothing is exactly perfect in this life, and for Annie Daltrey, the delicate but firm pressure on his rear parts was in perfect harmony with the eruption of his cock. He came, and he came. We are dealing with a hero here. At one point, his lover backed away to inspect the unaltered gush of it, like a plumber saying to a customer, don't blame me, this water supply will stop when the dam's empty.
There's a lot going on there, and I quite frankly can't be bothered to get into it. It was just all around now.
I can go through it bit
I'm sure
by
you
bit.
could, but I think let's skim
start
on.
with
it's
biggest,
a whistle stop tour.
with biggest black pearl that was being placed.
I pictured the boat from Pirates of the Caribbean immediately. Wow.
What about the phrase "Oh Lord," he cried out.
Oh Lord!
I'm a coming.
Yeah.
And just to confirm, like
just say how
that,
it's written.
that is indeed how it's written.
Yeah, very cool. Well, that adds flavour, right? That adds a kind of dialect. You really get the sense of the character.
Yeah, exactly.
Horrible.
Well,
Next.
Well, you don't. You have to judge.
Next.
You have to judge it quite so harshly like that.
I'm ready for the next one.
We're skipping ahead to 2010.
Nice. Now things were really kicking off here.
What was going on then? You can probably remember this sort of stuff now.
2010, yeah.
I think I was starting my GCSEs.
Crazy. I'd finished mine. It was a summer of excess. Too much.
The Roaring Tens.
That's what we called it. We saw it as the dawning of a new decade, and indeed it was. Kind of irrespective of how we saw it, that just was a mathematical, numerical fact. Yeah. But I remember well that the tenor of literature in that year was surprisingly abstinence-based. And so this piece, I think, came as quite a shock to the system.
Well, and, indeed it will. This is from a novel called Mr. Peanut by Adam Ross.
Yes, of course.
He buried his face into Hannah's cunt like a wanderer who'd found water in the desert. She tasted like a hot biscuit flavoured with pea.
Wait a second. A hot biscuit is not a taste. Do they mean in the American sense of biscuit?
What do you mean?
Well,
like
the biscuit as in like what Americans call a biscuit, presumably, rather than a British one.
Than a British biscuit.
Either way, I just don't feel like they're specific enough.
You're being quite judgmental. I feel like
you're
not like...
Carry on.
I just want you to keep your mind open to this. I know what... No, well, I know. That's why I'm intervening.
Oh, right.
To say for the sake of the pod, of tradition.
It's like good cop, bad cop. And I think this is bad.
Right, but I cannot pretend that this is all good. I cannot do that. She grabbed his scruff and pulled his face to hers. They kissed, and she took his cock. It felt as thick as a Louisville Slugger. That's a type of baseball bat.
Okay.
And guided him in. When he exploded, and he exploded quickly, he felt as if his heart had liquefied and then been shot out of him, up through her vagina and uterus and her ovaries,
you can't
and
feel
up
that
over
part.
her diaphragm,
you can't have
and
that
somehow down the vena cavity
you can't
to
feel
her heart,
something that is in someone
his
else's
own
body.
Now coating hers.
That's a mad bit of nonsense. You can't. The first part you could reasonably have the sensation of. You can't have the sensation of someone else's embodied experience.
You mean
That's
you
just
don't?
Ontological.
Are you saying that you can't
drivel.
feel my diaphragm?
Really
is that
stupid,
what you're saying?
Really nonsensical.
Why? Like,
if I felt like
again,
my heart had liquefied, I'd be so upset. I'd not be writing about it. That's for sure.
You wouldn't be worried about where it had gone.
Well,
for sure.
I don't think. Yeah, it would be the least of my concerns. That's a horrible image.
What do you think motivates a mind like Adam Ross's to decide? Like, fine, he wants to talk about piss on a biscuit, whatever. Like, again, you don't do a simile about sex. It's not going to work. No one. As we've kind of said before, like, everyone knows the sounds and the environment of sex. You don't need to try to inaccurately convey it with a sort of cookie meets piss image.
It wasn't really called for.
But what interests me more is to go from that to, like, not even he felt as though his heart had melted, but a 3-line, really quite, in a literal sense, visceral description of the melted heart being come into someone.
Yeah. And
indeed coating.
It's just the desire to have a new way
heart.
of saying it. I think this is the same thing that we land on every time we do this. It's just everyone is desperate to find a new thing that people are like, wow, that's so cool. I never thought of it like that. But the reason no one's ever thought of it like that is because it's super isn't like that. and in fact, nothing is like that.
No,
because that is an impossible experience written about by a man who has not even reread his own words with the single shred of thought it would take to analyse the meaninglessness of what he's written.
Well, and what was the editing process for Mr. Peanut? Like, who
it was sent
could
to
have
someone
read
who
this?
doesn't have a body. It was sent to a cloud consciousness to edit. So it was like, that's probably how humans are.
It literally just got spell checked. That was it.
It doesn't have any artistic merit outside of, like, obviously, there are occasions where the power of magical writing is such that you can call upon experiences that aren't actually possible to have. to create some kind of effect. Like, oh, what would it be like to fly? Wow, amazing. But
as may I say, was done very well by Mr. Ernest Cline in Ready Player 2.
Yeah, he really got into that. But in this case, like the metaphorical or the figurative nature of your heart turning into a kind of red jelly and going on the kind of tube network of your connected bodies, just what on the face of it, like even if you accept the ridiculousness of that metaphor, what's it trying to convey? Nothing. It's nothing.
Well, I think to quote yourself, it's very hot.
Well, no. Sorry if what I said sounded like I'd forgotten the essential horniness of it.
Right. Okay. Good.
Because that goes without.
It's just
doubt.
Sometimes, with your tone, with your voice,
no,
like
it does come across. I know this. I'm working on it.
You're making it sound like you weren't totally aroused the whole time I was reading.
Everyone who heard it probably definitely was, and all I'm saying to Adam Ross is like, maybe you've got a gift there, like we know that, but maybe use it a bit better.
Jonathan Franzen is another entry from the same year, 2010.
Oh, okay. A sort of contest, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think they were rivals? They're like sexting back and forth what their latest sort of concepts were?
It truly would not surprise me if they were, because it does feel as though he's really tried his best to outdo the grossness of Adam Ross's
I'm sorry to
Mr.
hear
Peanut.
that. Maybe we skip this one.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No. Because the thing about Franzen is, like, even though he's an incredibly boring man and writer, like, he is kind of noted in the way that people are as being
super hot.
Well, yeah, like, horny as hell. And
one of the poets of porn.
Is that...
That's his Twitter bio.
A pop? Is that what they call him? Yeah. But he is noted as a kind of bastion of 21st century American fiction. And here's why. One afternoon, as Connie described it, this is really quite difficult to read.
It's difficult to listen to, mate. I wouldn't worry about it.
It's really...
Sometimes on the podcast I have to wonder, who's this for? Trust that someone out there is jacking it silly.
Absolutely.
They're
having
Venus
the time of their lives. But
they're Vietnam slugger.
And, we've always liked to think, whether explicitly or implicitly, that our work exists to challenge the listener. And this is a challenge. Okay. I'm just, I don't find many of these difficult to read.
I'm so worried, because I know that's the case.
I really don't.
I wouldn't have read any of these. So I'm just concerned about the levels
in a way, it's because, and you'll see why when I eventually am able to kind of like breathe and get through it, but...
You've got to give it the reverence.
It's sort of in the same way as the previous one, like, just a largely, in some ways, impossible experience. But also this blending of something that it feels like it's trying to be magical realism, but is actually just the most flatly crude nonsense that you've ever read.
Very cool.
One afternoon, as Connie described it, her excited clitoris grew to be 8 inches long. A protruding pencil of tenderness with which she gently parted the lips of his penis and drove herself down to the base of its shaft. Another day, at her urging, Joey described to her the sleek, warm neatness of her turds as they slid from her anus and fell into his open mouth, where, since they were only words, they tasted like excellent dark chocolate.
But hang on, they changed from what they were.
Yeah.
In a way that...
Hang on a minute. They do rhyme.
They did rhyme, yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's...
Well. And T is very close to W in the
on the keyboard.
Yeah, that could have been a typo. That's foul, yeah. Really bad. Both images managed to be sort of specking down different talent trees of foul.
Yeah. A broad variety of foul, you could say, yeah.
It travels quite far within not too many words, which I suppose is something like a skill. What on earth does he mean about shitting words into someone's mouth?
And them tasting like dark chocolate?
Yeah, confusing.
I just don't know. I
don't accept that any context would would satisfactorily explain what he thinks that meant.
No.
And not in a cool way, like how David Lynch doesn't know what some bits mean. He just sort of is going for the vibe. In a terrible way, the opposite of that.
Well, you can't deny that he's created a vibe.
I didn't feel a vibe other than, well, tell me, this is being sick a vibe. Is it vibey to vomit?
To just sort of be sick up into the mouth.
Yeah, and then down into someone else's diaphragm.
Yeah, and then out
feeling every
through...
second and centimetre of
Felt
its
my
transit.
pancreas disintegrate into dust.
Into bile only.
Yeah. That has a real feel to me, like, very particularly, and I think it's just because, like, I've watched him be interviewed and read stuff like...
He's always going on about this.
Well, yeah, first of all, he's like, always...
Guys, I talked about comics.
He goes on Charlie Rose and we want to talk about your new book. And he's like, I'm going to stop you there, Charlie.
I've got something
Imagine if you will. No, but, like, this is definitely someone who has decided, like, to... kind of intentionally sully their own reputation in that way of like, oh, you thought I was this
pretty
like,
edgy,
guy. I'm actually... That is exactly the vibe.
He's something of an edgelord.
An edgelord, yeah. Maybe we could get him to write about edging, and then that'd be like two worlds colliding.
That would be beautiful. I didn't like that one bit.
Well,
everyone's got very weird names in these extracts as well. It's making me sort of reflect on how shit most characters' names are. They're all names, right? But they just all sound so fake because they're like attached to characters saying the most preposterous or narrating or having narrated of them the most preposterous, unhuman, inhumane, often just obscenities of experience that truly no one has had. I think it just makes everything sound so fake. Cool if that's what they're going for, but probably it's not, because it seems like it would really undermine the rest of a book.
It's quite possibly also that if you're going to write something that despicable, that you just need to make sure that you don't write it of or about anyone with a name who could possibly share a name with someone you know.
That would be a shame.
Because if you wrote that and then realised that, like,
your
second niece is, like, called Connie,
see them at a reunion,
then that's it. Like, you're going to nonce prison, where, you know, you rightly should be.
Regardless of Connie's age.
Yeah.
She could be 75.
Yeah, you are going
to jail.
Yeah. Maybe you'll be... more taken by the next year's offering.
Yeah, I do hope so, because it's been really bad so
Which is from a book called Ed King, by David Guterson, which is a kind of Oedipus take. And therefore, it is important to note that the two people in this are mother and son.
Ed King is let me just say, it's really an amusing way of turning Oedipus Rex into a kind of modern context.
What do you mean? I don't understand.
It's not something I'm willing to explain to you, because I don't know if you're ready, but coming to the understanding yourself will be more
hanging
fun.
like this, because it's just that there's a character called Ed King.
It's very good and fun that's how that works, and it has big vibes of when they updated the Bible to be called like the word on the street, and it's like, listen to this, yeah. Day 1, nothing. Day 2, God turns on the fucking light bulbs. Now who's talking? That's like probably less cringe than it actually is.
Yeah.
But yeah, this already sounds like a really bad project.
Well, you know.
But no.
You've got an open mind.
I have an open mind now.
Good. Yeah. Just keep telling yourself that. Yeah. So she took him by the wrist and moved the base of his hand into her pubic hair until his middle fingertip settled on the no man's land between her, quote, front parlour and, quote, back door. Brackets, those were the quaint, prudish terms of her girlhood. She got him on the node between neighbouring needs. Brackets, both
I fucking hate alliteration so much.
Both of which...
It's always so shit, man. I feel like I should stop teaching it. I might just like try and
we'll start a movement
to be like, you know what, it fucking sucks.
It's actually so bad every single time.
It's for superhero names only, is my rule. It's only disgusting and bad.
It just doesn't do anything. Well, okay. I would adapt that to say, in prose, it definitely doesn't do anything.
You just did one.
It definitely doesn't do anything. Definitely doesn't do anything.
Making me sick.
Definitely doesn't do diddly squat. That sort of vibe. But like in verse, I can tolerate it here and there where it's being used like precisely.
It draws so much attention to itself. And because of like the overarching tone of all of these extracts is like smug, pseudo-intellectual, toying, or like flirtation with the obscene or the extreme or the profane or something. It's all got this vibe of being like, let me drop one of these alliteration bombs on them. That'll really do it. Like, it just...
They'll be salivating for some real literature right now.
It's just really bad.
It's not
Really
good.
bereft.
Why do you think that has any kind of anything to do with the fact that it's the favoured technique of one of our favourite authors,
Bob
Sean
Honnold.
Penn?
Sorry, I mixed them up.
Yeah,
They're the same
they're equally
person.
absurd. Yeah,
Well, I think actually, to his credit, Sean sort of pushed me over the edge on having, like, in life, I'd come across a lot of alliteration, of course, from just various places.
it happens every now and then.
Bob Honey was so dense with it that it made me, like, suddenly, you know, when you can suddenly, like, spot the thing in a magic eye puzzle, it's like everything's in sharp relief. So I think it's permanently made my ear quite well attuned to hearing it, like, as a separate entity to the rest of the prose, but not in a good way.
Oh,
Sometimes that's a good thing. If you can hear, like, oh, I can appreciate the harmony that underlies this piece. That's quite nice. But in this case...
when you first realise you can pick out Zoigma.
yeah. And in the case of alliteration, it's almost always... It just feels like ham-fisted. It feels like people know that they're doing it.
Yeah,
Well, of course they do.
Yeah, and I think that it is because, unlike most other kind of like basic literary techniques that people like may or may not use, it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't have an effect other than to draw attention to itself, like you say. Like in poetry, sometimes it's nice. It's like a kind of can be a subtler way across more than 3 words, let's say, to either set a kind of aural atmosphere or to place something to create a kind of underlying tone. But it doesn't stand out as much in poetry because it is, most of the times anyway, kind of purposefully unnatural in the way that it is constructed. But like in prose, it doesn't actually do anything. It's just there. It's like a flourish for no reason. And so it always kind of inherently has that smugness that you mentioned. But it also, it's smug, but in that same way that people who are kind of like weird right-wing journalists who are very smug but very stupid. It's like, look at this thing I've done. And you're like, wow, well done. The thing you did was you found 2 words that began with the same
impressive.
letter. Like, what is it? What's it doing?
Yeah, I think there are cases where it can have some effect. I'm sure that people could quibble with the idea that it can't, but in general, it does just feel like exactly what I tell my students to do, which is like just include it because you'll get marks for it.
There you go.
It
Yeah.
just
Oh,
does
yeah,
feel
100%.
like,
right.
it feels like that has exactly just carried on as an attitude into professional writing. Like it just
People still doing point, quote, comment.
it just seems like a box that you tick to show that you can do it. It's so rarely, like, if I think about my favourite books across any genre or like any age even, there's nowhere on that scale where I'm evaluating the extent to which they mastered alliteration as a technique. Whereas like you could make the case that some writers are like their success is entirely predicated on their skill with weird comparisons, weird figurative comparisons that no one else would have thought of, or someone like Hemingway, that the tersity is what is effective. There's no author who you're like, God, he's the godfather of alliteration.
I don't like his characters much, but when he strings those words together,
drives me insane.
I start hooting and hollering at the moon.
The Ayatollah of alliteration.
Hang on.
Good. Yeah, don't think
Yeah,
about
no,
it
I
too
see.
much.
No, I could. You literally could not.
Look, our waveform looks like a fish's skeleton.
Wow,
That's good,
it
isn't
does.
That's a little joke for
They
only
say
us
that's
to
what to
enjoy.
go for. We've now made a slightly longer, unhealthier fish. You'll be pleased to know we've only got 3 left
Okay.
to go through.
That is pleasing.
Ending on a real classic.
Nice.
2012 was the year of
The London Olympics.
Ben Masters, who wrote Naughties, as in like the decade
hello.
Naughties.
That sounds
but this
fun.
was in 2020, like 12. So
and it has connotations of fucking as well, right?
why?
Because that's very naughty. In that
Yeah.
it's like a Hugh Grant thing. You might say.
Oh, like with an A. Naut.
That's a bit naughty.
Oh, yeah. No, I see what you mean now.
Sounds a bit naughty.
Maybe
like
maybe that does explain.
That's
some
just one of the
this.
ideas I've had. But there are other interpretations available.
Well, let's see what you think of the rest of his offerings. My hand dropped from her neck to her breasts.
like an
He'd
anchor
had a
into
sort
the
of
sea.
stroke. He just flopped down. She took it and forced it inside the cup of her bra, lending me her full cushiony swell.
Lending.
With my other hand, I traced the braille of her viscera.
The braille of her viscera.
Yeah.
Let me think. Let me think about that for a second. What he means is that you can feel people's organs inside their body.
And they're spelling
not
out.
true.
They're spelling out words.
Super not true. Let me try it on myself right now. Can't find a
Can
single
I try and get
organ.
the braille?
Go on. You got any braille in there? I've got the braille in my ribs.
It's saying some gamer words. That's
the
what
braille
I'm
of my
getting
rib
through
cage
there.
said this
The braille of
podcast
my
needs
rib
to be
cage is
stopped.
dreadful.
The braille of my rib cage is such
Definitely,
a good
it's a Rupi
poem,
Kaur poem
for us to write.
Yeah. Yes. So where were we? We were at, that was it. We were at the phrase braille of her viscera. Yeah. She read so differently from Lucy, who I presume is another person.
Is the do you have any insight into whether this character is blind?
No.
Cool.
I don't believe so.
I have generous reading. I'm going to assume
okay,
they are.
Cool. So I'm assuming Lucy's another person
Or
who
he's
he's
fucking
been
some
fondling
books.
on. Yeah. She became warmer and slick, more fragrant.
I hate the word slick.
Why is that?
It's horrible.
It
It's one of those words like acrid that I bet if you did like a Google Ngram search, acrid always refers to smoke. There's one that's always used to describe arid desert.
Yeah.
Slick is just always associated with oil spills.
Yeah.
When I hear slick, I think of little penguins.
I think of Dick Dastardly and Wacky Races.
Slightly different, but I guess there's a bird involved there sometimes.
Yeah, no,
it's not a hot word.
It's always, it's to do with fucking.
I mean, I get what they're going for, but it's like slick. It has other connotations that I don't think are ever intended.
No.
Like slick as in like, hey, how's it going there?
Danny Zuko.
Like a greaser.
Kind of vibe, yeah.
But that's clearly irrelevant.
We got up from the chair and she led me to her elfin grot.
Is his hand, where's his hand these days? Let me just check
unfortunately,
check in on the
we're not
story.
getting live updates.
Is he still being lent her swell,
He's
or is
sort
he,
of
is
she's
he tapping
taken
away
that
on
back.
the viscera?
His lease on that was up.
Right,
It had to go
fair.
back. Yes, she led me to her elfin grot, getting amongst
This is
the pillows and
John
cool
Keats
sheets.
reference.
We trawled each other's bodies for every inch of history. I dug
Trawling for history. What fucking
like
shit.
looking for a
Mixed
body on the
metaphor.
bottom of a river.
I was looking in the sea for a lobster and also the past.
I dug after what I had always imagined and came up with even more.
Oh, that sucks so much. That sucks in a really... That's quite a novel way, actually, that it sucks for these, because normally their problem is in over-explaining. But here, they've basically said, it was as good as you think, and that's how it was. And better. It was as good as you think, and also better. I won't say how, I won't say why.
Don't worry. I got what I was looking for, and I got other things.
Think about what you'd be looking... It was that, but more. More and even better and good. Shit. Terrible.
It's such a trite bit of bullshit, isn't it?
I like this one as well. This one actually covers so many different categories of what is shit about these. Like it's
quite instructive.
It has, yeah. It's like the archetype of them because it has the pretentiousness to be like going into the Keats
Braille of
quote,
viscera
and
elfin
also
grot,
that.
yeah.
It has the like bodily sort of body horror
of slick
and all that it
warm
entails.
and slick and fragrant.
It
and
has
viscera.
the speculative attempt at some kind of ultimately meaningless mixed metaphor to try and, as we say, find this brand new angle that suddenly people will be like, oh my god, and worth reading just for the fuck pages.
And of course, a a half-hearted attempt at the metaphysical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really powerful. The only thing that was missing is the scene or the allusion to the fact that someone's cervix was being invaded, which seems again to be thematic.
Absolutely smashed to
Yeah.
bits by a baseball bat of a penis.
Yeah.
Well, there is this last line that again brings in some other words. I think that you'll find.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise.
Yeah, no, you. It's okay.
I was enjoying it so
I
much.
told you to interrupt when you had thoughts, and,
Yeah.
and you've had several. She stroked my outlines in perfect synchrony until I was febrile in her hands, willingly guided elsewhere.
Outlines plural.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Nothing is a problem.
Yeah. Well,
You
maybe
can
like
say
this
fucking
side
anything in a book.
and that side.
The Bad Sex and Fiction Awards makes me hate literature.
Yeah. Well,
every time
it's like
we look at this.
who other than the literary review is keeping an eye on this?
I've spent a lot of words of my life defending why reading is good and suggesting that people read more and suggesting what they might like to read and finding things that they might
any of those
enjoy.
titles appearing on today's list?
Certainly not. And even like, there's a classic kind of STEM bro thing that's like, I don't read fiction, man. I just read self-help. I read non-fiction. I read just Tim Ferriss over and over again, pretending that a 4-hour work week is a thing. And explaining why, the act of, as is proven by myriad studies, the act of like empathy engaged in or entailed in fictional reading and imagining is so beneficial. But all of that flies out the window. Like if we did 2 back-to-back episodes of Bad Sex and Fiction, I would be done.
Well,
I'll never read again.
Well, let me tell you, for episode 200, I've got Mr. Franzen himself.
We were on the panel this year.
God, what a thankless job.
Terrible.
We've got 2 left.
Okay.
And they are bad.
No.
I'm not.
Sex and Fiction?
I wish that I could tell you that they're, slightly less horrible.
Yeah.
They are not.
Okay.
And they again managed to hit all of the sort of like tick boxes between them.
Yeah.
2013, Jonathan Grimwood's The Last Banquet.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask.
Yeah, I'm not going to interrupt.
That you not interrupt this one because I won't be able to finish it if you do. You know the peasant saying, if you can't imagine how neighbouring vineyards can produce such different wines, put one finger in your woman's quim, another up her arse, then taste both and stop asking stupid questions. My fingers found both vineyards. At the front, she tasted salt as anchovy and as delicious. At the rear, bitter like chocolate and smelling strangely of tobacco. My tongue explored each, and she shivered at one and giggled with embarrassment at the other.
You know that peasant saying that I've just made up? You know that cumbersome peasant saying that the peasants are always saying
when the
about
peasants
vineyards?
were saying
when peasants always have to talk about vineyards because it's a major feature of peasant life in this unspecified point in history that definitely existed.
Yeah.
That sucks. They can't get enough of talking about arses.
They cannot, can they?
BSIs.
He and Franzen must be jacking it 24/7.
There's a proud
just
literary
texting each
tradition of like anal obsession. Who are we thinking? Who is it's Joyce, isn't it? The letters,
Joyce loves it, yeah.
The letters that are like my farting delight or something.
Yeah.
Truly obscene stuff. Not to kink shame, but it's gross.
Yeah. That was kink shame if you're into that. Stop listening
a bad
to the show.
person. No, you're not a bad person, but you've got to know that.
Isaac's got some questions. He'd like some more information, is what he's saying.
No,
he wants to learn.
To what people do between each other, consenting adults
Between
is
each
fine.
other, inside each other,
Keep it
around
out
each
of
other.
keep it out of my life.
All of the sort of like 16th and 17th century writers, they love a bit of kind of arse play stuff, or even early like Chaucer, loads of bum gags in Chaucer.
The thing is, it's not very funny.
It's not funny, no.
One category of things that I've never found funny is
it is hot.
Oh, well, no.
It's
swing and a miss on both counts. Really unfortunate. I've never found that genre of humour funny, and I've never found that a book that I read, I was like, I wish they talked more about the anus in that book. Like, you don't finish fucking
pale
song.
fire.
Sure. And go, you know what was really lacking here was an exploration of the sphincters
the smells and sights
and
of
sayings
of quim
of
and
imaginary
arsehole.
peasants.
Yeah,
Terrible.
it's bad. No, it is awful. That one I think is my least favourite.
It's very artless. In construction,
But
like
it really-
setting yourself up for that with an
But
obviously made up thing.
More annoyingly, like it thinks it is the most artful.
It's got a real, to be fair to him, voice to it. I can really clearly picture the person who's like, I imagine that he imagined how it would sound on the audiobook when he wrote that line.
Yeah.
He's like,
Him reading it, of course.
You know how the peasants are always saying,
the peasants saying about
if
quim.
you want to fuck a vineyard, you better do a grape
You
up
better
the
do it up
arse.
the arse.
Then something, question mark, Man Booker Prize. Like, it's just nonsense.
Now, the final offering here is from 2015, and I think that this is kind of when the prize itself shot to a broader fame.
Right.
Because
of our podcast.
Unfortunately not. This was a bit before our podcast.
Well, I guess, sometimes the time ripples go in both directions.
But you will remember at least some of this, because the reason why is that the winner in 2015 was none other than Morrissey.
Oh, yeah, okay.
From his novel List of the Lost. And this, it actually, I kind of had always assumed, I don't think I'd ever properly read the extract in question. And I think that I had always assumed that he had, at least in part one, because he's Morrissey, and it was like funny to give it to Morrissey because he's a fucking lunatic.
Yeah. And writes like even more of a lunatic.
Yeah. But no, it is bad.
Okay.
You ready?
Are you going to do the Morrissey voice?
I'm not. No, I won't make it through.
Okay, fine.
Eliza and Ezra rolled together into the one giggling snowball of full-figured copulation, screaming and shouting as they playfully bit and pulled at each other in a dangerous and clamorous roller coaster coil of sexually violent rotation, with Eliza's breasts barrel rolled across Ezra's howling mouth.
Barrel rolled?
And the pained frenzy
Isn't that 360 degrees? A barrel roll.
across his howling mouth. He's another seal boy.
He's just screaming the whole time like he's on Oblivion. He's going into space.
And the pained frenzy of his bulbous salutation, extenuating his excitement as it whacked and smacked its way into every muscle of Eliza's body, except for the otherwise central zone.
The central zone.
Welcome
Morrissey
to
presents.
the central zone.
That's really funny.
You were about to enter.
That one, I mean, it's obviously nonsense, but it's at least quite enjoyable just for the trying to work out the logistics of the affair.
What is practically happening? If you had to film this scene...
Well, it's unfilmable. That goes without saying. Where would you put the
trying
camera?
to draw a tesseract.
Imagine the storyboard that cuts between a howling man and a violently spinning...
A woman doing some sort of Matrix maneuver.
But also, like, presumably in mid-air.
Yeah.
Reagan-esque, just able, as in from the... rather than
From the
Ronald.
president.
He was always
the
spinning
Nazi.
around. Yeah, really very strange. The Ezra and what was the other one? Ezra and Eliza.
Yeah.
More sort of names that sound like characters.
Yeah,
right?
so that no one can
I'd like
read
to
them.
interrogate this, and perhaps I know a vehicle for us to interrogate it on as of yet unannounced.
yeah.
But I think alliteration alert is something we should definitely consider keeping and moving forwards with. But also, like, is there more to what is at the core of the unreality of character names? Like, all of those are names. I know people called Eliza. I don't know him called Ezra, but of course there are people. I don't doubt it.
He didn't make up the name.
Yeah, and indeed there are people called Annie, and there are people called Mr. Peanut out there, I'm sure. But why do they all feel so fake in this context? Like, what is it? What is it about this context that strips them of all like reality? And yeah, agency?
I think that at least part of it is that no matter what you choose, because there's an acknowledgement from the off that this person does not actually exist, that it inherently, kind of whatever name you choose, feels very manufactured. Like, either you've gone for, you've called the person Ezra. My main characters are Ezra and Eliza, and you're like, oh, okay, like he's gone kind of fancy, or he's gone off piece,
gone for ease.
Or like the main character is called Dave, and you're like, well, you've called it Dave because you want this to be like an everyman thing. But like,
I posit that there is something about this sex context, because I don't read books and think, Gatsby, what are you up to?
What are you on about?
Humbert twice? Don't think so.
Humbert
Don't think so, Vlad. Get real. Who are you kidding? Harry Potter? But like, I don't care when I'm reading, but there are certain contexts where it just sounds patently ridiculous. For example, like in Doctor Strange, there's a bit at the end where he has to keep saying, Dormammu, I'm here to bargain. Spoiler. Yeah. And it was only after he said it like 5 times, I was like, this name fucking sucks. It's just an annoying collaboration of syllables.
Yeah.
Marmu. It's like a cow trying to speak.
Wow.
I'm afraid.
What, slammed
and
the
so
MCU.
there are certain contexts which immediately expose the cracks in the fiction and force me to unsuspend my previously. I'm good at suspending my disbelief. It's one of my great skills as a reader. I'm very easily immersed in.
Sometimes I see he starts reading a tweet and he's gone.
I'm straight away out there. But like, yeah, I'm interested in interrogating, maybe not now, but something for us to think about in future. What it is about these bad sex pieces where they all just sound so contrived and so false. And so unlike anything that a person who has ever or will ever, could ever live would engage in.
Maybe it's partly due to the fact that you know that when they sat down and decided on the character name, that they knew they were going to put this filth in the book, so that the name was chosen with the smut in mind, and it rings through in a way that it sounds like they think the name is in some way going to affect the scene.
Possibly. It's a theory. I think it's something that's going to require a PhD, if you're willing.
Okay. I'll start putting together the funding.
What conclusions can we arrive at here? Because I did present this. I know you weren't listening, but I presented it in quite grandiose terms as being us charting the development of sexual literary congress and the confluence of ideas associated with fuck chat in the bookosphere across the modern age.
Yeah, you did.
And now that we've arrived at the end, because when was that one from? 2015, you said.
Yeah.
Now that we've documented that almost 20-year period, I feel sick and none the wiser.
Well, I think there's a few things at play there. Number one is those were some bad years. Those were,
that's true.
Like, just historically, those were bad. It was a bad couple of decades.
Yeah.
Were it not for the births and subsequent lives of say, you and me, would almost have been worth writing off.
Yeah.
Another thing is, as is raised in every single article about this on the Literary Review site, is the problem of, well, unfortunately, people don't learn. Like, they have not learned. The approach to writing sex has not changed in that 20 years.
I would potentially suggest it's getting worse by virtue. It's almost like damned if you do, damned if you don't on the part of the Literary Review or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
Because it's like you're training an AI to kind of land upon the singularity that is the most disgusting. Like, there must be, I believe, a collection of words that you could read to me in, 2035's Bad Sex and Fiction Awards that just makes me die. Like, I'll just die. I'll be
like
so
a little
sick.
Code word.
All of the braille of my viscera will be obliterated.
Your heart will dissolve. It's going to be all over the floor.
Into space. But like, it seems like in pointing out the tropes, people are it's sort of challenging themselves to lean into them more or oppose them more robustly, which is actually equally bad. Like, I think the only way to win the game of bad sex writing, as we always say, is simply not to play
Don't do it,
and to make the very artistically valid choice of opting out of describing in
say no
to sex scenes. To sex brackets.
Oh, we've done some alliteration again.
Oh, fuck.
They're not learning. They haven't done anything. They are getting worse. Everything about it is bad and awful. But I also think that what we've sort of uncovered here in this episode, which I know we don't number them anymore, but the next is 200. This is 199.
It's about time for an
by
epiphany.
default. Is that what needs to happen is that there needs to be some sort of like show out there. There needs to be people going through, like keeping an eye
Calling it out.
on what is wrong with writing. Like who are the people who are doing the bad words?
Yeah.
And why are they putting them in books that are being sold?
Yes. At the expense traditionally of, because it's not a closed system, or maybe it is a closed system is the point I'm making, where, you know, every Ready Player 2 that gets a publishing deal is preventing probably on that budget thousands of books
of very good books.
From being even considered. So I suppose trying to dismantle the way in which there must be a market for this stuff. Like people do read these books. Some of these people are like big writers.
Yeah.
And they're part
huge.
of the problem.
What they are, if anything, more of the problem.
Yeah. That
If
liquefied heart is on their hands.
if Franzen were writing his 8-inch clitoris / turd word nonsense, if you were just screaming that into a vacuum, it wouldn't be a problem. But millions of people are paying to read it, and
needs to be monitored.
It does.
Well, we'll leave that there. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Just a thought to end the episode on. Until episode 200.
Can't believe it.
I
can't believe it.
And with the scent on the wind, you know that bit in Mary Poppins where he goes, he sniffs the wind. He goes, smells like the wind is like done a big change. Like something is stirring about to be strange. Can't tell exactly what might be in store, but it seems to me like a smell I've sniffed before. And the little kids go, yes, it seems to him a smell he has sniffed. And the beautiful honey before. And that's what we're doing.
And that's when Poppins comes along.
And she's like, all right, episode 200.
Everyone's licking up the air around here.
See you soon.
Bye.
Look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife. I mean the bare necessities, oh Mother Nature's recipes that bring the bare necessities of life. Wherever I wander, wherever I roam, I couldn't be fonder of my big home. The bees are buzzing in the tree to make some honey just for me. The bare necessities of life will come to you. For the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife. I mean the bare necessities, oh Mother Nature's recipes that bring the bare necessities of life. Wherever I wander, wherever I roam, I couldn't be fonder, my new home. The bees are buzzing in the tree to make some honey just for me. The bare necessities of life will come to you. Come to